let's talk about what I read in March. Now, it's only March 27th, I think? Yeah, it's only March 27th, and so there are like 4 more days to the month, so I probably will finish something else, but I always end up getting these videos up late, so I wanted to film it a little bit earlier than normal so that maybe I can actually try and get it up on time. Or maybe I'll just add something into the end of this, like just a little clip if I read anything else by the end of the month. I don't know. The next thing I read was a buddy read with my friend, and that was the Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. I thought I was gonna love this, and I really ended up not liking it. This has to do with a woman who's kind of lost in life, and she knows that there is this mystery surrounding her aunt where she went missing a really, really long time ago from this hotel, and so she decides to investigate it in the present day by going to work at that hotel herself. And then we get the flashbacks to the past when her aunt worked there before she went missing. I thought this was so boring. Besides the fact that it's boring, I also found it kind of confusing. Both of the timelines are mirroring each other, which I get how that could be an interesting idea, but in reality, I found it very confusing because I had a hard time telling which timeline I was in at certain points. Like, if I wasn't paying total fucking attention. And even still, like, I would still just be like, wait, is this past or present? Who are we following right now? Because they were just doing so many of the same things. In the past, her aunt is also investigating disappearances. And so it just, yeah, it was very, the timelines were too similar, the characters were too similar. And then when finally everything came to light, it just felt all really obvious. It wasn't, and I don't even know if it was supposed to be a twist or if anything was supposed to be twisty or revealed. I don't know if this was really that kind of novel. It was more just following along a path, and then it got there, and that was it. I just didn't love this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. The next thing I read with my friend was Behind Her Eyes by Sara Pinborough. This one was a fun situation because I thought I knew the end to this. I was like, oh yeah, I got spoiled for the ending. But it's so weird and crazy that, like, I can't wait to read it anyway. I did not know the ending to this. I was completely fucking wrong. I don't know why I thought this had to do with aliens. It doesn't. I can tell you that because that's definitely not the ending. I thought that the ending of this was she was an alien. And as I read it, I kept going like, I'm confused as to how aliens come into this because it seems like that would be way out of left field. This is about a woman who ends up caught up in her boss's marriage because she sleeps with him before she finds out that he's her boss and that he's married. And once she finds out all this, she also ends up being best friends with the wife. I really ended up enjoying this. Yes, there are parts that are kind of kooky and not so grounded in reality, but I thought it was different. I thought it was unique. I'm tired of seeing the same domestic thrillers over and over again, and so this was kind of exciting. I didn't love the final twist at the end. It just felt a little slapdash. It felt like it needed to be expanded upon just a little bit more, especially with the husband character. The husband character is so boring. You never really get to know who he is, and so I spent a lot of time wondering why either of these women were interested in him. I could understand why our main character was interested in him in the sense that she kept talking about how, like, she had just come out of a divorce and she was a little bit lost, and, like, he gave her something exciting to look forward to. All right, fine, but then the wife, everything with her, like, she just seemed so much more interesting than him, and, like, she could have such a better life if she just, like, told him to go away, because I got nothing from him. And then the ending came, and, like, it made even less sense to me because I just felt like if we had put more time into the husband, it would have been a 5 out of 5 book, because then I would have understood why everyone was doing the things they were doing. But, as it were, I give this 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it, and I would recommend it if you keep an open mind to it not being necessarily the most believable. The next thing I picked up was The Awakening. I don't know who this is by. By Carol Peckham and Susanne Valenti. So this is the first book in the Zodiac Academy series. I need someone to tell me if this is young adult or if this is smut. I didn't think that was ever a question I would have to ask about something because usually those things are pretty easy to tell apart, but I have no fucking idea. I picked this up thinking it was smut, and then I read it and there wasn't really a lot of sexual scenes. I think there was like 2, maybe? I know there was 1 for sure, but there wasn't much beyond that. And then I heard someone refer to it as young adult and I was like, oh. So now I just don't know. This is about twin girls who end up finding out that they are supposed to be going to the Zodiac Academy school. It turns out that they are fae and that They're actually the long-lost daughters of their former king and queen. So they have to go to the school and try to get through it and graduate so they can ascend the throne. But there is a group of boys who are already supposed to take control over the government in their absence, and so they're pretty pissed that these girls are suddenly back and going to take that power away from them. Now, if any of that sounds familiar, it's because I've talked about a series here on my channel that has the exact premise, and that's Cruel Magic by Eva Chase. It is so fucking close. Like, these series are nearly identical. The same sort of attitudes from the boys, and it's just, it all felt so familiar. I will say that the boys in this book are meaner and crueler than the boys in Cruel Magic, and that I enjoy because we know I love a bully romance. But if this is a young adult series, then I have no interest in it, because then it's never going to come to a point where things get sexual and fun. And I don't care about the rest of it. I don't really care about them getting powers and which order they are and all that other bullshit. It's just not that interesting to me. I want the hate to love. I don't even really want the love. I want the hate sex, okay? That's all I'm interested in. I almost had a wardrobe malfunction there for a second. I need to calm down. I gave this 2.5 stars. Tell me if it gets hotter. The next thing I read was Hex by Thomas Olde Hevoult. I started this a while ago and had to restart it because like I'd put it down for so long, but like I fucking loved this. This was 5 out of 5 stars. I'm goddamn obsessed. I need more from this author. It was so good. This is a horror about a town who has a curse put on it where there's this witch who had her eyes and lips sewn shut, and she just like kind of walks around the town, just shows up everywhere. She'll just show up at your house at random intervals, and you just kind of have to put like a tablecloth over her and go on with your day. Basically, if you ever leave the town for any large amount of time, you will want to commit suicide, and eventually you will. It'll drive you to commit suicide. There's a lot of different like technology and stuff. They have an app that tells you where the witch is at any point in time. They obviously have a committee that's responsible for this town and for making sure that nobody tells any outsiders about it, because people can come into this town. This town isn't quarantined necessarily. They just have to pretend like this isn't happening. They are told never to open the witch's eyes or mouth because she immediately drives people crazy, because obviously, of course, people have tried this in the past. This curse has been there for like thousands of years at this point. I just like adored this book. There were definitely times where maybe I didn't love 1 or 2 choices, but like I had to give it 5 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed it overall. I love the ending. This really starts off kind of funny because there's this group of kids. They of course think they're living under like martial law. They think everyone's trying to keep them down, and so they want to play pranks on the witch and stuff, and like things slowly escalate and you get to see the different perspectives of not only the kids but the townsfolk, and so much of this was so good. The way people are willing to throw each other to the wolves, the different kind of like religious beliefs that garner because of this. Like, this is Stephen King if it was actually interesting. I love this so much. 5 out of 5 stars. Possibly the best book I've read this year so far. The next thing I read was Joyride by Jack Ketchum. This is a horror book about a couple who kill this girl's ex-husband who's been harassing her, and this other guy just happens to witness it and decides to play a deadly game with them. I've always wanted to read something by Jack Ketchum because everyone talks about how like he really goes like above and beyond. Everything he writes is very grotesque. I didn't feel that way about this book. Maybe it's just because I've watched way too much horror. I thought it was fine. I wasn't in love with it. I think that the perspective from the killer was actually really good and really like insightful. I think getting into that state of mind can sometimes be tricky because it can be tricky not to go too over the top and ridiculous and not paint them into a caricature. And I think the author did a really good job at inhabiting this character in a realistic way. I felt a little bored by a lot of the book, unfortunately. I did really like the ending though. There was just something sort of cinematic about the ending. Like I could literally just picture it as a movie or something. This guy who's just going on a rampage through suburbia. It wasn't actually suburbia. That's not how they painted it, but that's how I pictured it. So that's what matters. I gave it 2.5 stars. I just don't think it was that memorable. Unfortunately, I do still want to read The Girl Next Door. I'm guessing Jack Ketchum does a lot of books based off real crime cases because I didn't know this one at all. I know The Girl Next Door is based off a true crime case, but I didn't know this one, and when I got to the end it did talk about how this was based off of 2 serial killers. So the next thing I read was 14 by Peter Clines, and this was such a fucking roller coaster, holy shit. This was a sci-fi book that takes place in an apartment building where some bizarre things are happening, and the guy who just moved in wants to investigate. I say this was a roller coaster because when I first started this, I hated it. Like, I just kept thinking, this guy has no fucking life, because he is investigating the most mundane mysteries. On the cover, it says something about it being compared to the show Lost. And I was like, interesting, so Lost in an apartment. I had a hard time picturing what that would be, and you know what, they are kind of right. But it starts off with these mysteries like, he has a black light in his kitchen. Ooh. There are some weird cockroaches, and like this one girl's apartment stays at 69 degrees at all times. And it's just like the most boring mysteries you could ever think of, and yet he's taking them so seriously. On the roof, there's this one building, and he's like, what's that building for? And the girl says something about how, oh, it's just like the pulleys and shit, the mechanical crap for the elevator. And he's like, I don't know, that seems a little big for that. And so he then proceeds to ask every single person in his building about it, and like what their opinion is on this building. And I'm like, dude, get a life. But I think that's the point. And that's what I realized about 25% in is this building is full of people who are just a little bit lost in their lives, who don't have a lot going on, so they really throw everything into this mystery because they're looking for a bit of adventure. They're looking for something to do with their life and a way to connect to other people. And then finally, like I think a third of the way through or so, things actually start ramping up, and there's so much that happens in this book, and I ended up really fucking liking it. It just goes in so many different directions and has these massive mysteries unfold. One of the twists is a bit obvious, but regardless, like, I loved this a lot. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I can't wait to read more in this series. I actually didn't even want to read this first book. I wanted to read the second book and thought that I had to read the first book to get there, but like, this so won me over. I'm really, really into it. The mysteries were fun. I ended up really liking most of the characters. There's just so many ways the series could go. By the way, Joyride and 14 I read for the Gear Up portion of the Magical Readathon. 14 was for the sci-fi prompt, and Joyride was for a standalone prompt, I think. And then I also participated in the Backlist Readathon. Come Closer was the first book I read, and it was for the one with like your favorite color on the cover. The next thing I read was Come Closer by Sara Gran. So this was about a girl who gets possessed and kind of the de-evolution of her marriage. I really thought this was fun. I don't have a lot to say about it, to be honest. It is what it is. It just kind of follows her along. I spent the majority of the book hating her husband, just thinking he was utterly useless. I gave it 4 stars. It's a novella, so like you kind of can't say a lot about it. I enjoyed the ending. I love a good possession story. Another thing I read for the Backlist Readathon was I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. I read this for books that you got from recommendations, and it was Kat who I heard talking about this. I'll leave her link down below. I ended up not liking this. I wish I liked this. This was a book of modern poetry that was all based around different final girls from horror movies. I love that idea, but I think I've just realized that modern poetry doesn't do anything for me. Like, I just don't really get it, or when I do read it and get it, it just still, like, I don't feel anything towards it. So I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. I'm not the best person to look for a rating on this or a review on this because I just apparently don't like this genre. The next thing I read was Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. I also read this as a buddy read. This was about a woman who is going around raping men. It all takes place from the men's perspective as they go through the trauma that is rape and the after effects. I thought this was really interestingly written. I listened to it on audiobook, and at first I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because you really have to get used to the audiobook and probably follow along, which is what I did for a bit until I got the gist of it. After that, I really ended up liking the audiobook. She has several different narrators in there, some of which are actors, and they did a really good job. There are so many different styles of writing here, and I felt they were all really effective. I will say that I feel like this is almost a book more men should read, to try and put themselves in that place. I don't think we ask men to put themselves in that state of mind very often. Not that men don't get raped, because of course they do, but obviously a lot of women get raped, and we talk about rape culture a lot, and it's not something that's hard for us to put ourselves in that state of mind because we've all dealt with something similar. I feel like this is one of the few examples I've seen where the man is put in that position and seen with empathy. This is never her trying to attack men. There were things about our current day, like there's a couple pages worth of Twitter things from like different celebrities, different authors, politicians, etc., and they all felt so accurate. There was a different bit with kind of this talk show of women talking about these men who are raped and doing it in a really derogatory way, which also felt pretty accurate. It really shows a way in which we fail sexual assault victims no matter who they are. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I finished 2 more books by the end of March. The first one being Den of Vipers. I'm giving this 4 stars, and I gotta say it's mostly for the main character. I just kind of love her. She's take no prisoners, badass bitch. I will say she's very badass in that very typical way. You know, she literally beats boys with a bat. I still enjoy it. She was very fun. She always had like a witty piece of dialogue, and that's great. This book is about a woman who gets sold by her father to the Vipers. They're basically the head gang in charge of running the city. Any piece of the criminal world, they are a part of it. There are 4 members of this gang, and of course, because this is a smutty romance novel, they all fall in love with this main woman. The sex scenes in this were sometimes hot, sometimes just ridiculous, but like that's the type of line I want to walk. I'm fine with a sex scene that is absolutely stupid, as long as it's unique and interesting, and these definitely were. There's the only 2 cons I have with this book is I didn't fall in love with the guys as much as I kind of expected to. They weren't as distinct and memorable as many other love interests in many other books I've read. The most interesting was definitely Diesel, because he was like the crazy one. The one who at one moment is a violent sociopath and at the next moment is just like a giant man-child. He was a lot of fun, and their dynamic was very unique, and the way that they all made jokes collectively about the relationship between the main character and Diesel, it was just really enjoyable, and it added like a really good sense of humor to the book. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really like it. The only other thing I will say about it is that it's really fucking long. It's like 650 pages, and I definitely think at least 50 pages could have been cut from this. The other thing I finished in March was The Troop by Nick Cutter. This is a horror novel about a group of boys who are away with their scout captain, and they end up getting isolated on this island. And weird things start to happen when an infected stranger shows up. I loved the first half of this. This has some body gore and some creepy crawly bits, and they are all so effective. The way that Nick Cutter describes things is just, you feel it and it just gets under your skin, and I just loved it for that horror aspect. Unfortunately, the second half did not work nearly as well for me. Because of the use of a certain character, I just found it too much, and it distracted from the stuff I was actually really enjoying. We already have young boys isolated on an island by themselves. We already have this infection situation going on. Did we really need to add a psychopath to the mix? I just don't like it, because that became what the entire novel was about, and I thought that the infection on the island and the boys' dynamics was actually more interesting. I really like to see how normal people devolve when faced with really gruesome and tragic and horrible events. And this took away from that, because that's like not what we ended up focusing on. We just ended up focusing on this one psychopathic character who I just didn't really interest me at all. So in the end, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, probably more of a 3.5, because I do really like Nick Cutter's writing, and I'll definitely pick up more from this author. I just kept finding myself not that interested in the story I was being told.